The question now is basically, can Bitcoin sort of catch up and get to what I called functionality escape velocity in my post about 5 years ago, right? Like having enough functionality that L2s on top of it can do everything.
I think you met Vladimir Putin a couple of times and also other leaders. What are their thoughts on Ethereum and the ecosystem? Maybe you have some insights to share about it.
Like if Ethereum gets super concentrated in like one single ETF or a few single ETFs, like that's definitely a big risk. I think that like having more diversified staking is definitely super valuable, and I think we should try to promote it as much as we can.
You don't think that like United States or Russia will like buy Bitcoin or buy ETH and get like a strategic reserve? Like this is something that you're bearish on?
So first, like on the quantum stuff in general, right? So the basic like way in which this will affect us is that quantum computers, they break elliptic curve cryptography, but not hashes, right? So they break about half of the cryptography that Ethereum depends on.
What do you like the most and hate the most about Bitcoin and Ethereum? Hello à tous l'équipe, j'espère que vous allez bien. Aujourd'hui, on se trouve pour une nouvelle vidéo et cette fois-ci, une vidéo un petit peu particulière parce que je suis tout simplement avec Vitalik Buterin, cofondateur d'Ethereum. C'est tout simplement lunaire ce qui se passe. Donc, avant de commencer, j'aimerais tout simplement remercier Abdel de Starknet qui a rendu cette interview possible, qui a tout simplement fait le lien entre Vitalik et moi. Donc, un énorme merci à Abdel. Et aussi, j'aimerais remercier toute la communauté, tout simplement, de m'avoir envoyé plein de questions que j'ai pu utiliser, et aussi des gens qui build tout simplement sur Solana, sur Ethereum, sur des layers 2, etc. Donc j'ai essayé vraiment d'avoir une approche communautaire pour offrir l'interview la plus complète. Évidemment, on a des contraintes de temps, mais on va essayer de faire au mieux. Vitalik, how is it doing?
Yeah, very good. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much for accepting this interview. I'm very glad. To be honest, it's been one of my dreams to do that. So thank you for that. So maybe to start, I was just wondering, like, how has your life been like lately, like for the past 2-3 years? Like, how were you personally? What were you doing? Like, how is life doing for you?
Okay, so I think since COVID, I've been trying to like travel less than I have been before, like still quite a bit. But before COVID, I was on average doing about like one trip a month or one trip a week. And now about like maybe 2 times less than that. I've been focusing on like a combination of things. So still a lot of Ethereum research and Ethereum development discussions. So like recently, the chain specific address topic has been starting to be big. So I was like heavily involved in like talking to different people, organizing, trying to set the direction on that. Research topics around all of the topics that I wrote about, blobs, proof of stake scaling. I think the percentage of my time I spend on that is definitely still like less than before. Like back in 2018, like I was still almost the only researcher in Ethereum. And now, of course, we have such a big and amazing team. And Justin has been stepping up a lot recently. Barnaby, Francesco, a huge number of amazing people recently. Like it's entire teams of them now, right? So still continuing to write the blog posts. The recent big one that I wrote was like all of those on the Ethereum protocol. And I think like my goal there was basically to try to like make the knowledge of like where the discussions are and what kinds of things people are thinking about, how people see the trade-offs, what goals people have, more accessible, to try to make it possible for more people to participate in that space. Also, continuing to just meet and talk to like different Ethereum communities. Also starting to focus more on the application side, like maybe this year and last year. I think up until like maybe 1 year ago, it was difficult to do things on the application side in like a very practical way because like you can talk about ideas, right? And I've been writing blog posts about ideas like, even like Futarchy back in 2015. But when the blockchain is difficult to use, not scalable, like you have all of those problems, it's still difficult to actually get anything past the idea stage into a large scale adoption stage. But now, of course, 2024, layer 2s are extremely cheap. We have all of these improvements in transaction fees, usability, transaction confirmation, wallet security. that like it feels like it's actually possible to really not just talk about the application side, but really build it. So like that was also part of why I wrote that recent piece on info finance, based on wallets. So starting to think much more about that. Public goods funding, also another topic. So definitely spend a lot of time like thinking about those kinds of different ideas. Also, like I try to stay in the trenches on the programming. This year wrote this like implementation of Circle Starks using like GPU and CUDA. So it was good for me to like that was really helpful for me to learn like both the math behind Circle Starks and how to do GPU programming. That was like the first time I ever actually properly did GPU programming. Like learning new things is like maybe like 3 or 4 times easier now that you have AI helping. So I feel like it's the golden age of getting new skills in a lot of ways. And then also like actually playing around with AIs and local models myself. I don't know if you saw that the bull post I made on Twitter a few days ago, but every one of those bull posts made Ethereum aligned. The AI is open source, so not calling to proprietary APIs in there.
Have you been trying? Have you been using like decentralized models, I would say things that were outside? We've seen like BitTensor, for example, releasing new stuff and having like an open source approach and a public approach. Like, is it something you've been checking or looking at?
Yeah, and so I talked to the BitTensor people. I actually visited one of their meetups in Singapore earlier this year. I think my theory with like decentralized AI right now is that the best decentralized AI is AI that just runs on your device. It's in our ecosystem, we sometimes have this tendency where we try to make things complicated and like stick things on blockchains and add tokens. But often the kind of decentralization that you need is like actually less making things dependent on like any kind of complicated remote stuff. So I have all kinds of models just running locally on GPU, and that just works great for a lot of my personal uses. And I know there's been interesting work around like distributed training. That's and I saw there was that recent release of a pretty significant model being trained in a fully distributed way, and I think that stuff's definitely amazing. I'm kind of watching from the sidelines. Like it feels like it's still a step or two away from being mature enough, but definitely really cool when it happens.
Okay, and I was wondering, like, what are you doing outside of crypto? Are you trying new stuff? Are you trying to educate yourself like about like new topics? You mentioned AI. Is there any other topics outside AI, or maybe even outside of crypto? Because people knows you as like the crypto guy from Ethereum, but what are you doing outside?
Yeah. So about a year ago, I wrote this big post that was called My Techno Optimism, right? And one of the goals there was to try to like basically have a much broader like philosophy of technology and what kinds of technologies are valuable to build, and especially if you care, like I think a lot of crypto people care about creating a world where the world doesn't blow up, and at the same time the world doesn't get taken over by a small number of very centralized actors. And like crypto is obviously part of that, but crypto is like only one part of that, right? And I think it's it's always valuable for us to kind of like update our stories and keep in mind like what's going on with the outside world, and stay connected and adapted to it, right? The original ideas in Bitcoin, and there was those words in the blog post, right? January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks, right? And that was really what animated the digital gold concept. But that's one of the things that we worry about. But then there's also all of these other concerns around like social media. Like I think people have different stories in their heads about why social media in 2024 is broken, but I think everyone definitely has a story of why it's broken, and like decentralized social media could actually be part of the solution. And then I've also been like very bullish on community nodes. I'm also prediction markets. Following like poly markets pretty closely, even participating on it quite a bit. Also on biotech. If you remember in 2021, there were this was the time when the dog coins were getting very big, right? So there was Shiba Inu, Methuselah, like
Yeah.
all of, not Methuselah, it was Dojo on Mars, but I gave a Dojo on Mars to Methuselah. And I gave the coins, the Shiba Inu coins, right? One part to the Future of Life Institute and one part to India Crypto Relief. And at the time, like, I was basically thinking very quickly, right? And like my mind was just thinking, okay, these coins, they went up to like $1 billion in 1 week. Therefore, they're going to crash down to like $10 million the next week. And like, I have to do something useful with them like now
Yeah.
and like very fast, right? And so I just like basically, sent them out to different charities. And I was expecting they would get like maybe like $10 million out of them. But of course, it ended up being, much crazier than that. Like, I did not expect this at all, but those coins kept their value. And both Crypto Relief and Future of Life were able to each individually cash out more than $400 million. And so out of that, like, that ended up being too much for Crypto Relief to spend. And and even to the Future of Life Institute, it's definitely having a hard time spending that large an amount. So myself and some like bio advisors I've known for a long time started this group called Balvi, which is basically trying to support basically open source bio defense and like biosafety work. So things that can make us safer against future pandemics, but without doing the thing where we like lock people in their houses and stop everyone from traveling for 2 years. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that came out of that, and a lot of that actually, it's like the research is like actually very connected to even research that people care about for things like BCI and longevity, right? So for like longevity, for example, right? I mean, you might have heard this like off the corner of your eye. This was news in the internet that basically the way that we thought about Alzheimer's for 20 years has basically turned out to be completely fake, right? And
Whoa.
like there's a lot of these newer ideas about what causes Alzheimer's, and a lot of them actually focus on viral persistence. So like viruses like staying in your body for a long time in reservoirs where they're just difficult for your immune system to even find them. And this is the exact same kind of stuff that people who study long COVID are worried about, right? So it's like all very connected, right? And like BCI is the same thing, right? So one of the things that Balvi put money into is Mary Lou Jepsen's Open Water. And she is someone who's like basically been ping-ponging back and forth between like basically healthcare technology and like doing VR for like Silicon Valley tech companies. And so the reason why they're connected, right, is that if you can like look inside your body, then you can read your brain, and like you can make very powerful interfaces. And there's a spectrum. There's like eye tracking. There's the stuff that their goggles are doing. And at the same time, there's like that exact same stuff is useful for like finding medical conditions way earlier than you otherwise could, and in a way that's like much lower cost and much lower infrastructure, right? So it's like much more accessible to people, and you don't. And well, I mean, France, you have public healthcare, but in America, you're bankrupt. So that's. So basically, there's a lot of these connections between a lot of these different branches of technology. And it's like a significant part of it actually is crypto, but there's also this big part that like really stretches beyond crypto. And so in DevCon, right, we had this DAC day on the third day, I think, the 14th, right, where we basically just had speakers talk about the whole range of all of those technologies. And like how who's working on them, like how they're being built, and even how they can be connected to each other. And it's all the same theme, right? And the theme is basically that we should have technology that can both help humanity progress and really get to the next stage, get all of the amazing things that we want in a 21st century. At the same time, do that in a way that minimizes risk and in a way that's like defensive instead of offensive, and in a way that like minimizes and prevents concentration of power. And like that combination of themes, right, is a combination of themes that I think really appeals to people, right? And
Yeah.
like even like like beyond crypto, right? I think a lot of people, they feel stuck between like one side, which is being like anti technology and anti growth, and basically saying, the solution to our problems is that we should go back to like living in cottages and not consume energy. And then on the other side is this like vision of technology that's being pushed by a few very powerful corporations and powerful and authoritarian governments, where we get amazing flashy things, but at the same time it's like very strange people that we totally don't understand, like end up getting backdoor control into our societies and our lives, and really wanting to avoid both, right? So I think basically there is this bigger story that crypto is part of, but crypto is only one part of, and I've been also trying to talk about the other parts of that story and really help put that together. So those are also things I've been like researching, doing, funding, thinking a lot over the last year as well.
But when are you resting? And like, have you ever thought about retiring at some point, especially from Ethereum? Because this is such an important commitment along your life, especially on the Ethereum front. So what are your thoughts about that? Like do you think about like retiring one day, or is it like a lifetime commitment?
So the thing that I've discovered about myself, like psychologically, is that feeling tired of work is actually not about work, right? And so what I mean by this is, so in DEF CON, on actually the day before DEF CON, I broke a personal record for the number of events that I did in one day. I did right? Like literally, like got out of the hotel at like 8 a.m., came back at 10:30 p.m. And the whole thing was this very crazy orchestrated thing where, we had myself, the local Thai driver and bodyguard. We had Yami, Ethereum Foundation person, kind of heroically coordinating everyone. And a couple of instances I had to like just personally, like check Google Maps, realize, okay, this thing is too far away. There's too much traffic. Let's just like get out and just run and take the subway. And actually, the team obliged. And like, it was just this crazy intense day, but I noticed that I felt great. And basically, like, I think, like exertion is not about exertion. And actually, the days when I feel like most discouraged and the days when I feel like I want to retire are like basically, actually, if I spend too much time being on crypto Twitter and I basically see people saying things like, oh, Ethereum, by caring about idealistic things and improving the world, is out of touch with reality. Ethereum Foundation people need to get with the program and understands that they're serving a community that just wants to make money and get high yields everywhere. And like, when I hear that, like, honestly, that's when I feel closest to wanting to retire. And
like being a bit disappointed and frustrated at some point.
Disappointed and like basically, thinking, okay, like if like the goal of blockchains is just being a casino, then like that's not even a thing that I would feel excited about being part of. But then the interesting thing is, right, that when like the last time I felt this way, right after that, I had a series of conversations with people within the Ethereum community and talking to people in person. And talking to people in person, like, you don't hear that
it's
at
way
all.
Better.
Yeah, you hear people who love Ethereum, who are excited about Ethereum, who are excited about, the financial applications and the non-financial applications, who really wants to try to use all of these tools that we have to make the world better. And like people are excited and energized, even in the bear market, right? So yeah, too much of the wrong kind of internet is definitely, very bad for mental health. And it's, always good to go outside and talk to the people outside too. So I guess I don't see myself retiring. I mean, I definitely have like changed my focus quite a bit over the last 10 years, right? Like back in 2014, I was researching and I did about half the work of writing the original one of the Ethereum clients, which was in Python, and also doing a lot of like foundation legwork, even like manually sending transactions to pay people. That's a responsibility that I had for a surprisingly long period of time.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
But now you're well more staffed, so you can delegate these kind of things to people that are maybe better at this stuff.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And now, like I've been, thinking a lot more about application layer things. I think, like one of the reasons why there is because, like I've been thinking about this topic, like basically, like why there is this sentiment that like we should just like give up and accept that we're a casino and be a good casino. And I think basically, a big part of that actually just is that there aren't like strong, compelling, positive stories that are like strong enough and that are like attracting enough people's attention. And I think the problem there is like for a very long time we had these like very abstract stories on the application layer, right? And like well, there is a combination of things, right? I think there is a lot of like what Peter Thiel calls indefinite optimism, which is like, oh, we're going to make the market more open and free and efficient. And the point is that we don't know because we're empowering humanity and humanity always makes things that are amazing. Therefore, the future will be amazing. And like Peter Thiel is like actually very critical of the indefinite optimist attitude. And like, I think I've come to appreciate that argument over time, right? Because like, at some point you have to like actually have the specific vision, right? Like if everyone just says, oh, society will figure it out or the market will figure it out, then like there's no one left to actually figure it out. So that's like one part of the stories that we had. And the other part of the stories that we had were like, decentralized Uber, right? And like payments and things that were like they were specific stories, but we didn't really have the tools to deliver on those specific stories. And thinking about the situation right now, right? Basically, I think there have been like these missing, very specific, like very definite optimist stories of what the space is up to on the application layer. And I think the thing that I perceived this kind of split between two different sides, right? Where one side basically says our story is things that are very idealistic, things that could be beautiful and improve humanity and solve social problems, but they have no way of making money. And because they have no way of making money, like they're not going to get anywhere, right? And like that's something that we do need to really respect as like a first-class problem. Like, we can't just say, oh, people are. Is it
about the funding or the business model or like?
Exactly. Funding, business model, and like hiring developers, right? And like this was a problem even before crypto, right? Like back when I was growing up as a teenager, I remember at Diaspora, this was like one of these very early Facebook alternatives, right? And it was decentralized social media before we had blockchains. And one of the big reasons why they failed was like they just got a tiny amount of money and it was just not obvious what kind of business model they would have. And like the attraction about crypto is supposed to be that, it is still something that's fundamentally very open source and very free and all about removing centralized parties. But there are more options for a business model, right? But in terms of like the stories that we've seen, like one part is very idealistic stories that just have no way of making money or even no way of like expanding beyond a user base that's like very basically idealistic nerds. And then the other story is like, let's give up on all of that stuff and let's just build the casino, right? And like, there's been these like two extremes, and like I think the things that are more likely to be successful are like the balance between the extremes, right? And like this is part of why I'm excited about like Polymarket, right? It's like as I wrote in my post.
Don't you think? Sorry to interrupt you, but don't you think that maybe Web2 people have something to bring to us because they are not thinking the same way? I mean. Some of them are thinking the casino way, but some of them are building legit business and might bring like fresh ideas and things that are more like on the way you're thinking.
I absolutely agree. I think like one of the reasons why I think like the casino stuff has dominated is because like just transaction fees, right? Like if you have to pay 25 cents every time you click a mouse button, then like anything that's not some kind of financial thing is going to fail, but like financial things could still be viable. And now I think like the question is basically, like what are the domains where crypto like actually gives you a 10x, right? And like there are domains where crypto gives you like a 1.1x, but the financial side is definitely like the place where crypto gives you a 10x, right? There's definitely non-financial applications that are super valuable. Like I've been a fan of, like identity, reputation, even just like putting hashes of data on chain for verification. But I mean, I think there have been good applications that like kind of sit on that edge. I mean, ENS was also a good example, right? Like ENS, most people who interact with ENS, they interact with ENS non-financially, right? It's just domain names, you update it. Like, if you've ever, like read anything in my blog, vitalik.eth.limo, that's a forwarder for my ENS. But at the same time, like you buy domain names, right? And there's a DAO and you pay fees. And like applications that like sit on that edge and at the same time, applications that like actually solve the kinds of problems that Ethereum people care about solving. Like I think those are the kinds of stories that like we need to make stronger. And so like those are some of the things that I've been thinking about too.
I was wondering, since you're like an early adopter of Bitcoin, then you got paid in Bitcoins like a long time ago by Bitcoin Magazine, and you digged into it and everything. Like, why did you not continue to work on Bitcoin? Like, is there a world in which like Bitcoin gets better and better, gets OP stack implemented, and maybe compete with Ethereum on some sides, So why did you stop working on Bitcoin? And is there a world in which like Bitcoin could get better than Ethereum or like could compete in some ways?
Yeah, okay. So when I started doing Ethereum, right? So the way what happened was first I was working on colored coins and Mastercoin. And basically, those were the projects that were at the time being called Bitcoin 2.0. Colored coins is like basically issuing your own assets. Like think of it as like basically in modern terms, it's like a sovereign roll up on top of Bitcoin that only supports ERC20. Like that's how like you would describe it to a modern developer, right? But it's like, and then Mastercoin is like that, but for like more complicated financial things. And I was starting to work on these projects, and then eventually the thing that I started doing was figuring out places where I could find like sets of 2 or 3 features and then replace them with one feature that combines their functionality and is even more powerful. And I did this for like a few rounds, and then eventually I realized that the end game is to replace their entire protocol with a programming language. And so I suggested this to them. They said, well, we'll get to it in a year. I said, well, I'm not willing to wait a year. And so I started doing it, right? So then...
It was the right decision, I guess.
When you look so now the earliest versions of Ethereum were actually meant to be sovereign rollups on top of Primecoin. Now, then the question is, why Primecoin? This like weird other proof of work currency that was based on like finding prime number sequences, right? Instead of Bitcoin. And the answer is that at the time, Bitcoin people, there was one of these mini civil wars. It was like probably a precursor to the big civil war. But the topic here was that the big parts of the Bitcoin community were very against Mastercoin. And they basically said, these are not legitimate usages of our chain. And there were people that were even pushing for reducing the OP return limit, like basically the limit to, like basically, it was like the Bitcoin's version of blobs, except they were very tiny, from 80 bytes to 40 bytes. And like the goal was to try to like basically kind of squeeze out things like Mastercoin and make them less viable. And so I thought, okay, well, if the base chain community is going to be hostile to things like what I want to do, why should I even build on Bitcoin? Like I should just support another coin that actually welcomes this stuff. And then the switch from being on Primecoin to being a separate chain basically happened when Ethereum just like blew up to being 100 times bigger than I ever thought it would be. And at that point, I realized like we actually have enough developers to make it a chain. And so I realized, okay, fine, let's just make it an independent thing, right? So that was the origin story. I think the question now is basically, can Bitcoin sort of catch up and get to what I call the functionality escape velocity in my post about 5 years ago, right? Like having enough functionality that L2s on top of it can do everything. So I think, so first of all, right, there's like a bunch of these proposals, like Opcat is one of them, right? And there's like a few others that extend Bitcoin scripting capabilities by enough that you actually can get, like what I call rich statefulness, and that also get you the ability to do things like verifying proofs on chain, right? And so there definitely are upgrades that they can do to like solve that side of things and like actually make proper L2s possible. Like proper L2s meaning like actually trustless L2s, right? Not like Liquid, where Liquid is like it basically is just a multisig. So they can get to that. The one obstacle that they would have is that an L2 cannot give users security on a faster timeline than the underlying chain, right? So the underlying chain average block time is 10 minutes. Sometimes it's 5 minutes. Sometimes it's like 30 minutes. It's a Poisson distribution. And any of these layer 2s, like they can't give you that level of security on timescales faster than Bitcoin itself. And with Ethereum, like the SWAT time is 12 seconds. And so Ethereum does have that advantage, right? And then also, of course, there's the differences between proof of work and proof of stake, and the fact that like it's still one of those very unknown things, whether or not proof of work even can provide enough security just based on transaction fees, right? And like this really has not been tried before. And I think, we've seen Ethereum, right? Like we had very high transaction fees in 2022, and then we had very low transaction fees in most of 2024, and now they're starting to pick back up again. And so like transaction fees are this very volatile thing, right? And so like that's one of those big unknowns. And the other one, of course, is just, the politics. Like, do Bitcoin people actually want this, right? And, if they were united behind wanting OP-Cat, it would have already happened, right? So it's like essentially...
You're quite
like,
pessimistic for now.
Yeah, I mean, for now, pessimistic, and then
or
also
realistic.
just like... Yeah, exactly. And then technologically speaking, I think there's definitely differences, but like there's still like some distance between what Bitcoin can offer, even if it wants to, and like what Ethereum can offer. But the possibility exists.
And is the current state of layer 2s what you envisioned like 3-4 years ago? Would you have done anything differently? Because like layer 2s works. Personally, I'm using it like on a daily basis. Everything works fine, but people are quite critic on some aspects, especially the decentralization and some other technical stuff. So what are your views on layer 2s, how they have been designed, how they have been created, integrated, and how they work today?
Okay. So one of the things that made me happy in 2024, well, actually two things, right? One is that we finally have blobs, and two is that we finally have stage 1 rollups, right? So in Optimism and Arbitrum, stage 1 as EVM rollups, and then also Fuel and I think D-Gate like got to stage 2. But they're not EVM, but they got there very early. Yeah. So blobs, they make sure the rollups like actually have enough data to actually be scalable, and they basically stop the layer 2 market from competing with the layer 1 market. And so as a result, layer 2 transactions are finally like actually cheap. And stage 1 basically means like the rollup actually has a proof system, and the proof system like actually has teeth, right? Like it actually contributes to deciding like which state root is the correct root. And so the layer 2 is not just a multisig, right? And so the way that stage 1 and stage 2 work basically are that stage 1 means that you have a security council that needs 75% in consensus in order to override the proof system. And stage 2 means that the only chance in which any security council can have any influence at all is if the code provably has a bug. Like the code disagrees with itself. Either it does nothing for a week, or it gives two contradictory answers, or you have different proof systems that disagree with each other, and so on, right? And so like stage 2 is the one I think you can really call it being like properly decentralized, right? Or fully decentralized. And stage 1 is this kind of hybrid that's in the middle, and stage 0 is like you're just a multisig, right? And so this year we've made big steps toward moving away from being just a multisig. You have stage 1 rollups. And there are many teams that are telling me that they're going to be able to get to stage 2 next year. And like some even very early next year.
So it's just about time. This is what you mean.
Exactly. It's about time. Also, the other thing, I think, like the interoperability discussion is important, right? I think for the first couple of years, we were definitely not appreciating enough the need to like really push standards and care about interoperability. And now, of course, we're realizing the need to like make Ethereum feel like a unified ecosystem instead of just being like 43 different blockchains. And so that's something where there's a lot of work that's happening right now. So excited about that becoming a solved problem next year. So yeah.
Do you think Solana pushed you to accelerate on this side?
I think a lot of things pushed us. I think another one is just like the internal pressure from inside of the Ethereum ecosystem, right? Like it's definitely, Solana and like bad ETH BTC price action and all of those things have made people a lot more willing to like actually like get off their butts and like be radical and try to solve things more quickly. But then the other thing is like we've finally moved to that stage where action is happening on layer twos. Layer twos actually exist, and it's just the problem that's staring everyone in the face, right? That like these days, all of the interesting applications are on layer twos, and so to do anything, you have to jump between all of these different layer twos, and like everyone sees the problems very directly.
How can we prevent all the value migrating to the layer twos, leaving like mainnets without any purpose? And do we want to prevent it?
So I think value capture is one of those like very fascinating and very complicated topics, right? And I think one of the challenges is like people just like we don't know where value capture really comes from, right? In a lot of ways, like there's one of the standard theories of where value comes from is discounted cash flow, right? And the whole ultrasound money thing was trying to play into that. But then at the same time, it's like, Bitcoin has like no discounted cash flow at all, right? And like it does, but then Bitcoin is, the most valuable one. Then, like generally it's like the correlation between like having revenue and having value as an asset is like not that strong. And the other way to look at it, right, is like, it's like, there are other chains that say things like, we have a clear North Star. Our North Star is to be decentralized NASDAQ. But then what's the market cap of actual NASDAQ? It's like low tens of billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot. Yeah, there's like a lot of unknowns. And so I think in this environment of very high uncertainty, I think we need to focus on, like what are one is focus on the things that feel that can be known, and two is to just be very diversified, right? And so I think like one of the interesting things that's been happening in the discourse in 2024 is like a lot of the old memes are coming back, right? Like people love the idea of Ethereum as the world computer. And I think the other, like one thing that's a good complement to that is this idea that came from Bankless in 2018 that's like ETH as the triple point asset. And their idea there is basically that ETH has multiple different value streams. So one of them is like basically ETH as digital gold. One of them is ETH as discounted cash flow asset. So ETH gets burned and the supply goes down. And one is ETH as a collateral asset inside of applications, right? And all of those things, like they're additive with each other, right? It's like basically, you really like any one of those existing, like actually makes the other two stronger, right? And so I think, like, I don't think that we need to like sort of formally decide and say, like, yes, ETH is a software company or ETH is digital gold. I mean, actually, we definitely should not decide that ETH is a software company, right? Software companies, software companies get replaced every 20 years. Software companies have to like constantly, completely change their products every 5 years in order to stay relevant. Like those things are fundamentally at odds with being a blockchain that gives people trustfulness and dependability, right? And so the whole point of the original L2 vision is like layer one is trustful and dependable, and layer two acts like a software company. And so like the things are additive, but then it's like obviously not automatically true that all of those things happen, right? So like one of the concerns is basically is ETH even going to be the dominant collateral asset, or is it going to get outcompeted by USDC, right? And like that's an actual risk, and like just supporting ETH as a collateral asset and making sure that ETH is easy to use as one is something that is very important. So that's one. Another part is like just like the level of attention, right? Like if the level of attention goes to projects that have relatively little alignment with the whole Ethereum ecosystem, then like the thing that they're going to push in front of their users is their own asset, right? And they're not going to even try pushing ETH in front of their users, right? And so having a large share of attention be like concentrated in ecosystems and like things that are very closely attached to ETH is and the whole Ethereum ecosystem is like something that's very important, right? And so I mean, this is also one of those ideas why, like, recently there's been this desire to push for, like, some kind of, like, I think neutral rollups is the term, right? Like, the long-term vision is native rollups where you actually have, like, a precompile to do proof verification, but the short-term idea is, like, Nethermind with Surge, they recently, announced that they want to do this. Like, basically rollups where the rollup has no special separate token. The brand behind the rollup is just Ethereum, right? And the rollups try as hard as they can to just set up all the technical parameters in a way that minimizes trust requirements, is stage 2 from day one, like basically stage 2 for as long as it has to be, and then eventually becoming native rollups, and support being maximally interoperable with Ethereum L1 and all of these things, right? So I think like that's one of those reasons why that idea is valuable. Like I definitely think that as an ecosystem, like we should be careful about this, right? And we should definitely make sure that ETH, like the attention doesn't flow to things that have zero interest in ETH gaining value. But like, there's also a lot of different ways that can happen, right? And I think like the diversified posture that the Ethereum ecosystem has is good, and it's a strength, and we should also like build off of that, and also make sure that each and every one of those parts of it is like supportive of the whole Ethereum ecosystem.
Quick questions on the layer 2. So imagine a world in which like the layer 1 is way more performant compared to now. Like could L2 disappear or become useless, or like or will layer 2 still always significant and important within the Ethereum ecosystem? Maybe think about it like in 10 years or 20 years. Like, is there a world in which happens?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, short term, there's definitely work that can be done on making the layer 1 more powerful, right? And there's a growing movement to increase the gas limit. There's work on client optimization. There's things like multidimensional gas, so like a few other optimizations that you can do. Like I think it's possible to like safely increase the gas limit by maybe a factor of 10. But and that's like short and medium term, right? Then in the longer term, I do think that there will always be a frontier where you can get more scale and faster speed by making more risky trade-offs, right? Like basically, I think there's like some amount of scale that you can get with just a layer 1, some amount of scale that you can get with native rollups, or like neutral rollups, or just generally, like very secure rollups. And then there's some higher level of scale that you can get with plasma, pre-confirmations, technologies that have some higher level of assumptions added to them. And so there always will be a difference, right? And that's fine, right? And I think, the goal of Ethereum should be that there are some applications that just happen on layer 1 directly, or that happen on these neutral rollups, and then there's some applications that happen on other kinds of layer 2s where like it's just fundamentally not possible to deliver enough performance to satisfy those applications without risking centralization, but that's fine, right? Because the whole point of a layer 2 is that the layer 2 like makes extra trade-offs, but then even if the layer 2 fails, you can always retreat back to layer 1.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about politics and regulation, maybe topics that you like. But I was wondering, like, what are your views on recent elections in the US, Donald Trump getting elected, ETFs getting in, Musk directing Doge, like the efficiency department? Like, how will it impact the ecosystem in your opinion? And are you in discussion with the US on this side? Are you also in discussion with other countries? Like, how is the political environment evolving around Ethereum and you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for crypto, like as a first order consequence, it's definitely just good as a legitimizing effect, right? Like even in countries far like beyond the U.S., where I've talked to governments, like pushing ideas that are favorable to crypto is like significantly easier than it was 2 months ago, and that definitely is a fact. I think. And if you start, like going a bit beyond crypto and start kind of asking the bigger questions, right? I think like one of the ways that I frame, like DAC when we were talking about this earlier, right, is that there's a lot of people that feel stuck between these two sides, where one of the sides is like, growth is bad, we should live in cottages and we should regulate everything, and then the other side is like, let's build big and amazing and flashy stuff, but like 5 people control all of it, and like. The general, cultural vibe, political vibe, everything is that basically the first side got weaker and the second side got stronger, right? And like I think the ideas around decentralization are still continue to be very important, right? But it definitely like it does mean that just in terms of like visions for the future, the stronger competitor is the competitor that says, let's just do it, go build great stuff, and like not care about concentration of power, and like relatively the weaker competitors like, let's give up on technology and live in cottages, right? And so I think that like to a first order, that's roughly what's happening. And so I think but at the same time, still there are basically, I think there are important messages that our community needs to get out there that are not the same message as anti-crypto people, obviously, because we are crypto people, and also that are not the same message as a lot of the people that have been putting like very big amounts of money into political lobbying. And I think, like different like groups in crypto continuing to just have that independent voice and have that independent story, both toward regulators and also, I think, towards just like the wider public and people who are kind of just interested in or concerned about, like what is the big picture that everything is leading to, continues to be important.
I think you met Vladimir Putin a couple of times and also other leaders. Mm-hmm. What are their thoughts on Ethereum and the ecosystem? Like, I'm not sure when you met like the largest leaders, if it was like very recent or like a few years ago, but maybe you have some insights to share about it.
I think, a lot of the time, people in those positions, they don't have like deep thoughts on crypto specifically, right? And like a lot of the time, right, these are people who, they're definitely older generation than us. Like their thoughts around things like technology, economy, regulation, business, they were definitely formed around, themes that existed, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And so, like, even when you have people that believe in things like, free markets and like open economy and free society, like, okay, like those things are, they're great. And like those perspectives sometimes lead them to be quite friendly. But at the same time, like at that top political level, like you don't really get an understanding of like the specifics, right? But the understanding of the specifics generally happens at like the civil service level. Like there's a lot of people in lower levels of government that are like often very crypto native and participate in applications and like have coins and like just know about all of these topics and like participate just as you and I do. So a lot of it, like, there's definitely a growing number of people that are like that. I think 10 years ago, that was not true at all, right? I think now it is true. And so I think, like maybe 10 years ago, right? Like the strategy was basically, that, it was not realistic that they could understand in a positive way. And the best you could hope for is to just like stay out of the eye of Sauron for as long as possible. And I think now, like, the more realistic thing is to like actually present in active vision that actually makes sense and that that aligns with enough of their objective, and to like help people in those positions see the alignment of interests where it exists, right? Yeah. I'm personally, definitely, like bearish on, like Russian institutional use of crypto. I mean, even just like completely putting aside morals and like thinking about this in like a very
Yeah.
realistic, pragmatic sense, right? Like, generally, if you're a large country, then like a default perspective that you'll have is like you favor things that you control. And things that nobody controls are like like the second alternative, right? If you're a smaller country, then like you have no chance in hell of like actually being the controller, and so the open and free stuff is sort of more natively interesting. And for larger countries, I mean, they like I think at the institutional level, like you just have lots of alternatives other than crypto, right? Like there's
So so
like
you don't think that like United States or Russia will like buy Bitcoin or buy ETH and get like a strategic reserve? Like this is something
what
that you're bearish on?
I don't know. That's
I know
yeah.
this is tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky, challenging. But I guess for the payments use case, like I feel like if you're an institution, like if you're a large country, governments, then there's lots of ways other than crypto to get to do what you need, right? There's like all kinds of bilateral trade options, and then like all of the like BRICS stuff around like U.S. independent financial systems is like continuing to happen. Like I think the types of people that crypto more uniquely helps are like the little dogs and people that don't have those like institutional connections with any superpower. But we'll see.
What do you think about the threats that are around Ethereum, especially when it comes to more ETH getting into ETF and that will be probably staked at a point, Lido controlling most of like Ethereum staked, and also having layers of risk getting added with risk taking and Eigenlayer and all the solutions like that. Is it something that you're worried about? Is it something that you're fighting in any way? Because like since Ethereum went to the proof of stake, those are kind of things to think about, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I think it is a concern. If the if Ethereum gets super concentrated in like one single ETF or a few single ETFs, like that's definitely a big risk. I think that like having more diversified staking is definitely super valuable, and I think we should try to promote it as much as we can, right? And so like solo and squad staking are good, and I think the right kind of decentralized staking pools are good. I think even like Lido, I think it's like it's better that it has like 25% than if it has 0%, though I think it would be worse if it has 75% than if it had 25%. So I think it's one of those balances. It's it's something that we need to watch out for, and I think like promoting staking decentralization, but also making staking more robust against cases like 51% attacks and like a lot of concentration, right, is important too. And so for those reasons, I've been like promoting a lot this 51% attack resistance, also inclusion lists, and like some of those censorship resistance ideas. So I think all of that is important.
I wanted to maybe finish around AI because it seems something that you're kind of interested in right now. I think you mentioned the quantum resistance problem and issue that we could get. But is AGI a bigger threat compared to quantum computing, or is it linked in any way, especially for blockchains?
So first, like on the quantum stuff in general, right? So the basic like way in which this will affect us is that quantum computers, they break elliptic curve cryptography, but not hashes, right? So they break about half of the cryptography that Ethereum depends on. But for each individual thing that quantum computers break, we already know of a quantum safe replacement. The reason why we don't use them today is because they're less efficient than the quantum vulnerable things, but eventually we will have to switch to them, right? And like we know
what's the timeline on this? Sorry to interrupt you, but what can we expect?
I think, if we had to scramble, like if literally quantum computers were coming in 6 months, we had to replace everything in 6 months, we could do it in 6 months, right?
Okay.
But that's like if we had to scramble, drop everything, like do extremely unsafe alternatives, probably give up on staking, decentralization, like all kinds of things, right? I mean, in doing it well, I think it's a matter of prioritization. Like, I think realistically, we'll see quantum safe Ethereum in 5 to 10 years, but like the priorities will get adjusted as we get more information about how close quantum computers are. And then,
So it's not that serious for now. It's like not in 1 or 2 years. It's probably in 5 or 10. This is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think about like 10 years for quantum computers breaking cryptography, I think is still a realistic timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, and then for AI, I mean, I personally don't really see quantum and AI as being like super connected to each other, right?
Okay.
And like
this is maybe a naive question, but I'm like, AGI, quantum computing, what happens?
Like if you get both, I don't know. I mean, so far, like my honest opinion is that I think quantum computers are just not going to be that big a deal. And the reason why I say this is because like the main algorithm that quantum computers can do that's like useful is Grover's algorithm, right? Which basically lets you speed up what are called search problems quadratically, right? So like you can do a search problem of size like 1 billion billion in the time and the number of step in 1 billion steps, right? But then what we're going to expect early quantum computers to be relatively like slow, to have high overhead, right? And so like the amount of effort per computation is going to be higher on the quantum computers. And so I expect, even though like theoretically quantum computers like break like Bitcoin mining and a lot of things, but like in practice, I don't expect them to like actually be more efficient for quite a while, right? But meanwhile, AGI, on the other hand, is this like crazy thing that's just going to completely overturn how the world works, right? So I guess quantum plus AGI just looks mostly like AGI.
And like, do you think we are overestimating or underestimating the impact of AI to the world we live in? You know, like, is it like, are we too crazy about it? You know, when we think about it and like the time it would take to make changes, like especially people think like things will change like very quickly. Like, are we overestimating this, or what are your thoughts about like how things will progress?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in how fast AGI will come. Like, there's this debate of basically the debate is the current set of strategies that AI is using one that is fundamentally missing like some categories of the intelligence that humans have that's like fundamental to our ability to think and come up with all the amazing things that we've come up with? Or is it basically just a matter of scale, right? And like, to me, both sides are plausible, right? Like the argument is basically that AIs have been massively superhuman at specific tasks for like 50 years, right? So, arithmetic, they've been superhuman. Calculus, they've been superhuman for a long time. Chess, superhuman for 20 years. But at the same time, like there have been other like aspects of how we think where computers have just barely caught up right now, right? And the way that I think about the distinction between what AIs do great already and what they might be, like what the current approach is, might not be able to do, is like interpolation versus extrapolation, right? It's like, is the new thing that you're asking the AI to do something that is within the range of within the same category as the training data that it's already seen? Or are you asking it to do something that's like fundamentally new, right? Yeah. And there have been some interesting attempts to try to formalize this. Francois Cholet had this podcast with Dwarkesh. I'd encourage people to listen to it. He has this thing called the ARC Prize. It's arcprize.org, where he came up with his benchmark test of like a puzzle that humans can solve. Like, it's not super easy, but it's also not super hard. But where AIs just have an incredibly difficult time solving. And it just like it feels like an IQ, one of those IQ test questions, right? Especially if you take like some of the more recent IQ tests that like try to be culturally neutral, right? It's like, you look at like boxes and you try to find like geometric patterns. It looks like one of those, but like it's still surprisingly hard for the AI to do a good job on those, right? And But like that's only one example, right? So I think even if ARK price is broken, there's still a possibility that like AI extrapolation is fundamentally hard for AI. But the argument is basically that like maybe there's a different style of thinking. Like maybe instead of gradient descent, it's like search, right? And like basically there's like a style of thinking, it's like search that humans are also good at, but that AI, like the gradient descent approach just like gets you nowhere, right? And so I think it's this unknown, right? Like basically how much further you have to optimize in terms of fundamental approaches. I mean, this year we've already seen, like just raw scaling stop working as effectively, right? So we've seen, the GPT is basically they've been switching away from scaling training time and they've switched to scaling compute time, right? Basically, if you use like O1, basically the O1, what it does is like it talks to itself for a minute before it gives you the answer. And that's like already a different technique.
I've been using it. It's great.
It is great, right? But it's definitely like there are still like these big regions where like it can't quite get to human level reasoning, and like if you try to keep pushing it, it still gets stuck. And so the question is like, how difficult is it to get past that? Like, is there some like if you think of it as in the 1980s and 1990s, like maybe 1/3 of human thought, AI is just completely surpassed. Like basically right now, are we in a world where AI's completely surpassed another 1/3 of human thought, and there's like a last 1/3 or a last like maybe 10 or 20% that it will take another generation? Or are we basically like on a trajectory and like it'll come and overturn everything in 5 to 10 years? And like I don't know, right? There's like super confident people that are super confident in both directions, and I just think it's completely crazy to be super confident about anything. So be open to both possibilities.
Very interesting. I wanted to finish with small extra questions.
Mm-hmm.
Hope funnier questions. So we've seen that you appeared with the founder of Aave and founder of Hyperliquid and other builders. As you mentioned, you're meeting more and more people like building applications on Ethereum. Who are your favorite ones? Like all the ones that you like the most? I know it's a bit arbitrary, but maybe the ones that gets you the more excited about the future of Ethereum.
Okay. So I think with applications in general, like I have a lot of respect for things that just stay working for a long time and just like do a simple and useful thing, right? So I've respected Uniswap for that reason. I think Aave has done a good job of like really entering that category. Like it's, I think at this point, this like very dependable and reliable thing in the same way that like Maker was 5 years ago. Then again, in the prediction market space, obviously like Polymarket is the big one, though recently I've also been trying to see what the rest of that space is like. Martin Koppelman, he has just like done amazing stuff in like all of the different regions, right? So Safe, the wallet, I use it. CalSwap, I use it. Omen, like he's also done his own prediction market thing. Circles, the basic income token. I think it's really interesting too. Then optimism people, I respect in particular for the like retro public goods funding side of it, right? Because like they are a layer 2, but they also do the retro PGF, and that stuff is just incredibly valuable. And like I would definitely call it like kind of application layer, though it's obviously an ecosystem wide thing. It's done a great job of just funding all kinds of developers. Then the Across team, like they've done a good job of pushing cross layer 2 swaps and ERC 7683 and like trying to make that a decentralized standard. Then Farcaster and Lens, both of those for decentralized social. Firefly, so Suji Yan and from the Mask Network, like he's been continuing to like try to figure out decentralized social media stuff for quite a long time. And it feels like what Firefly is right now is like it's basically a multi-client, right? So it's like a Twitter client and a Lens client and a Farcaster client and a client for other things as well. So trying to just like make the decentralized social media world very useful in that way.
Do you get inspired by them?
By who?
By them. Like, do you get some inspiration like in your work from them, or is it like mostly on your side digging like other stuff?
No, I think so. Yeah, I think, and there's definitely like ideas that come from them that I end up finding very very valuable, and like it's also just great to get the real life experience and like seeing what works and what doesn't.
What do you like the most and hate the most about Bitcoin and Ethereum?
What do I like the most about Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah, like the most and hates the most.
Oh, hate the most. I mean, I think with Bitcoin, like I definitely just like respect that it's a simple thing. Like they know what they're doing. You can use it. It works for what it works for. Like it's a simple and dumb technology that doesn't like try to push other complicated stuff on you. For what I like the least, I think definitely like the surrounding culture around Bitcoin. So the fact that like the high priest that they seem to respect the most is Michael Saylor. Like, come on, like that guy is just totally cringe. He is the like I saw it like someone's some tweet that was just like I forget the context. It was just like listing, like founders of different, or like the leaders of different coins, and like basically saying, like what would Anatoly say, what would Vitalik say, and then for Bitcoin they listed Michael Saylor, and like the fact that Bitcoin's become an ecosystem where like that's what gets celebrated, and that's like the conventionally recognized number one character. Yeah, I don't know, like that. And then also just on top of that, like you have, like the Bitcoin conference, and they have these ads that are proudly saying like, well, one was like, it was some Bitcoin media website that was saying like Russia is legalizing Bitcoin mining, and they have like, Vladimir Putin with like a glass of wine and like celebrating. And then it's like, they just do all of these different things and like why. Okay, so that's Bitcoin. For Ethereum,
interesting.
For Ethereum, it's like what do I like? I like definitely just the community and the values that people have, the things that people care about, the spirit of wanting to build things that are useful for the world, the cooperative spirit of people wanting to work together, the like will to the interest in building like open and decentralized systems that are like really at the same time like valuable for helping people and solving real problems, and at the same time really taking a balanced approach to things. The thing that I dislike the most about Ethereum, I think realistically, like the complexity of the protocol as it currently is. Like I think it could be made 3 times simpler, and I think it should be. And I think we should be willing to make some hard choices in order to push it in that direction. So that's one of the reasons why I actually really respect the like the Justin beam chain thing, right? It's I mean, obviously, we have to, there's a lot of really important stuff that we have to ship to users long before 2029, right? And we are, right? So like about a week ago, we agreed in the Pectra hard fork to add blobs and, or to increase the blob count, right? So the target is going up from 3 to 6. And I think that's just like very important for L2s and also a strong signal that, we actually care about scaling and that our bots actually are off the ground now. Like I think I would have been more bearish on Ethereum if that hadn't happened. So increasing blob count, pushing forward on account abstraction. 7702 has been, I think, very good this year for like really unifying the community around an account abstraction roadmap that solves both the security and the user experience and functionality concerns. A lot of like good stuff happening in the short term, but also like at some point the Ethereum protocol is definitely becoming more and more of a mess, and like at some point we have to just explicitly go and say, hey, we're cleaning it up. And like if that breaks backwards compatibility, then like too bad. Like we have to make a Python 2 Python 3 switch at some point, and I think the beam chain is good. So hopefully that happens. I think it's okay for that to be like second priority after all of the really urgent user scaling stuff, but that does need to happen at some point.
Vitalik, thank you very much for your time. I really want to thank you for all the time and help you've been doing, especially with the French-speaking community. I think you changed a lot of lives within the audience, including me. So thank you for everything. And I would like to finish this interview with your words. So do you have any words for the French-speaking community, especially around Ethereum, I guess? Peut-être en français?
Oui, je sais pas quand j'ai appris le français à l'école au Canada, mais je n'ai pas parlé français beaucoup depuis longtemps.
Pas de souci.
Alors, oui, je ne suis pas sûr
Très à
que
l'aise.
je peux parler.
En anglais aussi, sinon.
Oui, des thèmes techniques très difficiles dans ce langue, mais j'espère qu'après quelques années, peut-être.
Okay. And maybe in English, I guess?
Yeah, no, in English, I know. And I think the next year for Ethereum, I think, is just going to be a very exciting year. I think, a lot of infrastructure is out there. A lot of people really care about building applications. People really care about making the ecosystem work well. People really care about finally getting out there and building and executing on the vision. And I think now is like an amazing time to get into the Ethereum community and just build the things that we've been excited about using blockchains to build the whole time.
Thank you, Vitalik.